Moulin Rouge is a movie about when a young poet moves to Paris in the new Renaissance age, and it takes place in 1889. And he moves there to kind of get into the writing game and see if he can influence the way how the times were. And during this time, he starts going to a nightclub and meets up with a group of people he starts hanging around with. And they take him to the nightclub, and he sees a courtesan, which is like the main star of the nightclub, and he falls in love with her. And they set up a meeting for him, and during this time, the courtesan and him kind of become familiar with each other, and they fall in love, and he falls in love with her, and they actually have a real connection, and she falls in love with him. And during their love affair, they experience heartbreak, pleasure, and true love. And I think the three main things to take away from the Moulin Rouge is that heartbreak is inevitable, don't succumb to temporary pleasure, and that you can't buy love. Now, the biggest concept of Moulin Rouge is most likely that you can't buy love. Throughout the whole movie, the main courtesan, Celine, made men think she loved him just because they paid a fee. And the only time she was really in love was that when she loved Christian, and they actually felt real feelings for each other, as you'll see if you watch the movie. And she loved her, and he loved him, and they both showed it in ways that words couldn't really tell. Celine also made a duke think she was in love because that's kind of what her job was, and it drove the duke so crazy that he eventually tried to kill Christian to win her over. The duke also tried to force love upon Satine by introducing new pleasures to her, taking her out to eat, inviting her to stuff, and he also blackmailed her into ruining a play they were working on because she wouldn't sleep with him, and all these endeavors actually didn't work out in his favor. Debate.org says that there's money can only buy an illusion of love, and many people will buy stuff to make people like them, but they really don't feel that connection. And Toulouse even kind of confirms these suspicions because he was talking to Christian, and he said even though he feels himself up on women and wine and whiskey at the bar or at the club, he still doesn't really feel that connection. And people with money will usually marry people with money just based on the fact that they both have money. And usually those kind of marriages never will work out in the end. And the next concept to take away from Moulin Rouge is to not succumb to temporary pleasures. Many people went to the Moulin Rouge to seek pleasure from women and whiskey and drinks, but they only found temporary happiness. As I mentioned before, Toulouse, he would go drink. He was there all the time. And he really couldn't find true happiness, which he admitted to Christian. He said he knew what love was, but he's never felt it. And Oxford Dictionary says that a definition of pleasure is enjoyment and entertainment as opposed to necessity. And I think this fits what the Moulin Rouge was about perfect because everybody went there almost every night and just had a temporary pleasure of looking at girls, dancing with them, buying drinks, doing all sorts of stuff to feel temporary pleasure. It wasn't a necessity, but a lot of people attended because they felt that it would give them temporary pleasure. They weren't really looking out for true happiness. I think temporary pleasures mostly come from material things, and you can get temporary pleasure, but you can't get it from like having a family or maybe getting a promotion at a job because that's true feelings that you actually feel. The last and maybe most important concept of the Moulin Rouge is that heartbreak is inevitable. Heartbreak has been talked about throughout history, from the Bible to Shakespeare, and heartbreak can come from a social attachment or a pain system. Heartbreak can also lead to depression, and there's actually a syndrome named heartbreak syndrome, and it's kind of close to having a heart attack, but like there's just a deep pain in your chest that you feel from disappointment and or some sort of emotional distress, and it is caused by heartbreak. In the case of the Moulin Rouge, the main heartbreak came because of love and sickness, and Christian loved Celine but couldn't really have her because she was a courtesan, and she even went out of her way to trick him into thinking she didn't love him because she wanted to save the show for the Duke, and that was temporary heartbreak. And the other form of heartbreak was at the very end when she died because I think she had tuberculosis, is what I could kind of get from it. And she died real young, and they really didn't have time to grow together. And that was his main heartbreak. Personally, my main heartbreak in high school and up to this point came from high school sports, you know, a buzzer beater was heartbreaking, or a close baseball game that you ended up losing was also heartbreaking. And heartbreak varies for many other people. It might be breaking up with a significant other, doing bad on a test, not getting a job you want. It's just a natural human response when things don't go our way. And there will never be a cure for heartbreak, but I think we as humans can kind of take it in stride, I guess, kind of not encourage, but embrace it as something that it happens to everybody and we really can't avoid it, because there will always be something that comes along and breaks our heart no matter what it is. So basically, the three concepts I can apply to life from Moulin Rouge is: you can't buy love, do not succumb to temporary pleasures, and heartbreak is inevitable. Each was made obvious by the movie and are easy to apply to life. It's basic human nature to want to buy love, have temporary pleasure, makes us feel good for a little while, but not really seek what we can long term find. And every person can also expect to have their heart broken at any point in their lives, and I think it's something you should just kind of embrace and not really stress about, because it'll happen and every person can get over it.